All right, this is the second section of our discussion on our third revolution in the medieval period, Islam. We've already gone through Islamic history from Muhammad through the divided kingdom. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about what Muslims believe and what their duties are. And the two things I want the student to be able to do as a result of this lecture is to be able to identify the key beliefs and duties of Islam and be able to compare those beliefs and duties to Christian thought and Christian actions and duties. I do want to spend some time at the beginning of this to demonstrate how Muslims would evangelize a Christian. I think that also challenges our assumptions on Islam. I think most Christians believe that Islam only spreads through violence. But that's just not true. Muslims have their own version of missions. They have their own versions of evangelism. The word for it is dawah, Islamic dawah. And they even use Christian scriptures to try and demonstrate the truth of Islam. Now, I will read what a Muslim might read, or what a Muslim might have a Christian read in order to demonstrate that. Muslim would ask a Christian to turn to John chapter 1. Most people would assume that there is an argument on the deity of Christ here. You're going to go to verse 1, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And one would assume there is some argument there about whether or not Jesus is God. You'd be surprised that's not where they're going with this. They will direct you to John 1, verse 19. And I will read this as a Muslim might read this. I'll try and play both sides of this conversation. So starting in verse 19. Now this was John's testimony when the Jews of Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to ask him who he was. He did not fail to confess, but confessed freely, I am not the Christ. Okay, time out. So a Muslim would say, so the Jews expected one person, a guy named the Christ. Is that correct? Sure. We know that person as Jesus. So yes, the Jews were expecting one person. Okay. Then a Muslim would say, keep reading. They asked him, then who are you? Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Okay, time out. So now the Jews are expecting two different people, someone named the Christ and someone named Elijah. Is that correct? Okay, sure. Someone named the Christ, who we know is Jesus, someone named Elijah. Not really sure what's going on there, but yeah, two people. A Muslim would say, okay, keep reading. And then your eyes look at the verse and you see what's going on. It says, are you the prophet? Whoa, time out. Prophet? Capital P prophet? I wonder who that could be. So in the Muslim's mind, he would say, okay, so the Jews were expecting three people, the Christ who's Jesus, Elijah, and a third person called the prophet. I wonder who that could be. First time I heard that, I was intrigued. That was a very interesting interpretation of this passage, and it took me a while to kind of sort through it. As a Christian, I think it is reasonable to understand the prophet as referring to Jesus as well. Jesus's three offices are prophet, priest, and king. So as a Christian, I have no problem assigning the roles of Jesus, both as Christ and prophet. And it also speaks to the confusion that the Jews had concerning who this Messiah was going to be. Obviously, they did not fully understand what to expect, because when the real thing came, they killed him. So it's not unreasonable to conclude that the Jews were a little confused about what to expect as far as this Messiah is concerned, and may have expected a separate Messiah and a separate prophet, when, with the benefit of hindsight, we realize that these two offices were referring to the same person. But from the Islamic perspective, this is very interesting. And in my mind, it's even more interesting that Muslims look to use our scriptures against us. If you understand some of the basic beliefs of Islam, this is not as surprising and may equip us better to engage Islam both globally and politically, and hopefully locally and personally as well. So we're going to talk about two different categories today: Islamic beliefs and Islamic practices, and we have 5 in each category. So the first one we're going to look at is the 5 essential beliefs of Islam. And the first one is the belief in one God. There is no God but Allah, the Tawheed. This is also the beginning of the Islamic confession called the Shahada. There is no God but Allah. And it expresses the central concept of unity in Islam. There is no room for a trinity in Islam. As a Muslim will tell you, there is one sun, there is one earth, there is one Allah, there is one Islam. It is a unitary religion. The greatest sin in Islam is to assign companions to God, is to assign other people on the same level as God. We call it idolatry, they call it shirk. Assigning companions to Allah, which is another reason why theologically and culturally Islam and Christianity are very, very far apart. Second essential belief is a belief in angels. This is roughly analogous to the Christian concept of angels. Their description of angels are the same as our description of angels. They may rely more on the intervention of angels and how God governs the world, while we might defer more to the activity of the Holy Spirit, more of a direct divine intervention. But we both believe in angels. That's very interesting to me. The third essential belief is believing in God's book and in his messengers. The Quran is the book of Allah. And according to Islamic belief, Allah first sought to give this recitation to Moses. And he had Moses write down the Quran, the recitations. And then the Jews corrupted it. And then God chose another prophet, Isa, which in Arabic is Jesus, and Allah gave this message to Isa, and the Christians corrupted it. And then God chose a third prophet, Muhammad, and Allah gave him the recitations, and that's when God said, enough is enough. I'm going to divinely preserve this text to keep it from being corrupted the same way it had the first 2 times. This is why a Muslim can use the Bible against Christians, because they believe this was originally the Quran that we corrupted. But obviously, according to the Islamic perspective, we didn't corrupt all of it. It still retains this section of the capital P prophet in John chapter 1. So Muslims believe that the Quran is divinely preserved. The Quran, as Muhammad has recorded it, is divinely preserved by Allah, and it is unquestionable. In our bonus episode, we can look at how the Quran was compiled and compare that to the New Testament to see which one might be more reliable. But at the end of the day, you cannot question the Quran according to Islamic belief. It is what is the literal, spoken, eternal word of God, and cannot be altered. Okay. To believe the messenger is to believe the message, and this is why Muhammad has such an exalted position within Islam. But they don't believe Muhammad is divine in any sort of way. He was just chosen of God. To believe the messenger is to believe the message. Fourthly, the fourth essential belief is a belief in the last day and resurrection from the tomb. Muslims believe that after we die, everyone is going to be judged based on his or her deeds and either go to heaven or go to hell. That's analogous to the Christian belief in the resurrection. We differ in that we believe that our deeds can only send us to hell, and that we need the deeds of Christ applied to our lives in order to be eligible for heaven. So the Christian concept does not look at good deeds versus bad deeds like some sort of scale. We believe in salvation by grace alone. Islam believes that you are judged based on what you do. And we are about to look at the 5 things a Muslim is expected to do in order to get into heaven. However, the 5th essential belief does call that into question somewhat. The 5th essential belief is a belief in providence. And Muslims believe in providence. An Islamic belief in providence is analogous to a Christian belief in providence, but very different. Just about every monotheistic religion believes that God is in control of this world in some way. But Muslims believe God is responsible for every little thing that happens. This providence, this power of God that Allah exerts is absolute. Now, as Christians, we actually believe that God is all-powerful, but that God does have some limitations. In Christianity, we believe that God is limited by his own character, that God cannot lie. If God lies, then he is no longer God. In Christianity, we believe that God cannot change. Change in Christianity is theologically hard to justify because we believe that God is the greatest of anything that can be imagined, that he is the greatest example of any category. And if God were to change, that would imply that either God was not the greatest in every category, and if he changed, he became perfect, which means he was not before, which means he could not be God, or that God was perfect and any change from perfection would, by definition, be less than perfect. So Christianity has a hard time with believing that God can change. The Bible does use this phrase that God changes his mind, and that has been problematic theologically for Christians. I think the best way to understand that is God's way of explaining himself in human terms, and anthropomorphism, if you will. Or theologically, it's called accommodation, that God speaks in terms we can understand. Similar to God's eyes are wandering to and fro about the earth. God doesn't have eyes, but that helps us understand what is going on there. Christians have a hard time with change because we believe that God is limited by his own character. Islam does not have that same problem. They believe that God can change his mind at any time he wants. For example, when it comes to the final judgment, Allah can say, hey, these are the 5 things you need to do in order to go to heaven, and a good Muslim will do those 5 things, and a Christian will not do those 5 things, and we get in front of Allah at the last day. And according to Islam, Allah has the ability to say, I told you if you did those 5 things that you can go to heaven, but I've decided to save the Mormons instead. The Mormons are the ones that are going to get to heaven. And according to Islamic belief, Allah can do that. Christians, we have a hard time accepting that because of who we believe God is. This belief in providence is so extreme, it impacts how they feel about the world, how Muslims feel about the world. And having served in the army, I have come in contact with stories where an Islamic family lost an 8-year-old girl due to collateral damage, friendly fire. And soldiers were really torn up about it. And it did not necessarily seem as if the parents were all that torn up about it. And from a Western perspective, it seems as if, it doesn't seem as if they love their kids in the same way. That's not it at all. They believe in the providence of God so absolutely, they use the term inshallah, God wills it, or mushallah, God willed it. They believe everything that happens is the direct intervention of Allah. I don't think that means that they have more faith than we do. I think they just have a different conception of who God is than we do. But they do have this absolute belief in providence. So the 5 basic beliefs. This idea that God is one, belief in angels, belief in the Quran and what that means to Muslims, belief in the last day and the judgment, and how they believe they are saved, and this belief in providence identify Islam in an interesting way, because all five of those are things we as Christians would affirm in our own way, but we understand these five beliefs radically different than Muslims would understand these beliefs. And that provides both a point of connection and a point of disconnection between Christianity and Islam. Something that is a little more unique to Islam than these five essential beliefs is their five pillars of faith, their five basic practices, the five things every Muslim is expected to do. The first one, and the most important one, is the Shahada, the confession, the testimony. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This is roughly analogous to the Shema in Judaism. There is no God but Allah. It's important to know in Islamic belief that Muslims believe we are all born good Muslims. Deep down inside each one of us is a good Muslim waiting to get out. And the longer we live in this world, the longer we are in this world without doing these five basic duties, we accrue this crust, this shell around us that traps our true Muslim inside. And the duty of a Muslim is to do these five things in order to peel this crust away and let our true Muslim shine out from inside of us. And the first step in that is this public confession of faith. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. This cannot be a private choice. Being Muslim is a public affirmation, very similar to Christians and baptism, a public profession of faith. The second essential duty, the second pillar of Islam, is the salat, the prayers. No one asks you, are you religious, or do you believe in God? In Islam, they ask, do you salat, do you pray? This is a ritual fixed prayer, 5 times a day, so that everyone is doing them together. Remember, there is one sun, there is one earth, there is one Allah, there is one God. Islam is unity, and they seek to work out that unity through their prayers. Fixed prayers, you say the same thing, go through the same ritual 5 times a day. They can be done anywhere as long as you can purify yourself, do the ritual hand washing and face Mecca. They do allow you to make up prayers. If for some reason you cannot do these prayers, like oftentimes in times of war, you cannot stop fighting the enemy in order to do prayers, they can be made up later. These prayers are initiated by someone called the Adhan, the person who calls Islam to prayer. And there is a very ritual call. God is great, God is great, God is great, God is great. I witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Rise up for prayer, rise up for prayer, rise up for salvation, rise up for salvation. God is great, God is great, there is no God but Allah. I have it here in Arabic transliteration. I'm not going to try that on here. That calls the community to prayer. And when they gather for prayer, they go through the same motions, the raka for bowing. These are done 5 times a day, every day. So there is no one holy day or day of rest like we have in Christianity and Judaism. When Muslims gather for instruction, it's usually on Friday nights, something called Juma, where the community gets together, goes through the prayers, and gets some instruction. These prayers can happen anywhere, but if you are within walking distance of a masjid or a mosque, that is the best place to do them. So we have the Shahada, we have Salat. The third duty, the third pillar, is Zakat, or alms. And this is analogous to tithing in Christianity. But they only pay 2.5%. And it's paid once a year, and it can be paid to anyone but usually it's to some sort of charitable organization, but it's not to the pastor per se or the imam per se. So if you open up an Islamic newspaper or whatever, there's usually these advertisements. Oh, you can give zakat to this, you can give zakat to that. You are exempt from zakat if you are poor, and the Quran defines poor as if you own under 3 ounces of gold. That's about $1,000 in modern terms. I don't know if they've updated that number, or I don't know if they interpret that in light of modern cost of living or what have you, but that's what the Quran says about it. Fourth pillar of faith is Sawm, or fasting and reflecting. And this is analogous to Christian ideas of fasting, but again, very different. Muslims believe that God created the physical world to be enjoyed, but 1 month out of the year, 1 lunar month out of the year, the month of Ramadan, they are to forego that enjoyment in order to focus on God. That's relatively consistent with how Christians think about it. Jesus said, I've come to give life and life abundantly, but there are times in which we are also called to take up our cross and follow him. So we too have the same tension in Christianity. Fasting in Islam is different than fasting in Christianity. Fasting in Christianity tends to be more of an absolute fast. No food for a 24-hour period or longer, or when we fast for a day, it's a 24-hour period. Usually that means no food, but water is okay, and juice might be okay in Christianity. Islam is different. Islam fasting is from dawn to dusk, and nothing can pass through the throat. Strict observance to this. Some people who strictly observe this will carry around a cup and will spit into this cup. They won't even ingest spit, much less water or juice. Some go so far as to not smoke during Ramadan, to not inhale smoke through their throats during this time period. But there is a little variability there, and they do make exceptions for medical needs. No drinking, no eating, no intercourse, no smoking. That's the literal level. The moral level of Psalm is abstain from all other sins as well. And you do this to eliminate distractions so that you can focus on Allah. After dusk, though, all bets are off. They have feasts most evenings, and they eat well into the evening. Some people even flip-flop their days, so they're awake all night and they sleep all day, so it's not a big deal to fast from dawn till dusk. And when most Muslims figure out how we as Christians fast, they're amazed by it. We think, for them, man, you fast for an entire month. That's unbelievable. That's crazy. They look at our fast for 3 days going, man, that's unbelievable. That's crazy. Because we fast very differently. And there's one night, the night of power, Eid al-Fitr, to commemorate, I believe it's the first time the angel Jibreel appeared to Muhammad, is when the fast is broken, the break fast. So we have the Shahada, we have Salat, we have Zakat, we have Sawm, and the fifth duty of every good Muslim is the Hajj, or pilgrimage. Every year, more than 2 million people descend on Mecca during the last month of the Islamic year, Hajj, that is. They believe Mecca is the geographic center of the earth, and the earth rotates around Mecca. Not just Mecca, but specifically the Kaaba in Mecca. We talked about the Kaaba and its place in Islamic history. But as far as Islamic practice today, during Hajj, they have several days in which they do various activities over a multi-day period. But the first couple days, they gather around the Kaaba and they do salats. They do their bowing and their chanting. 2 million people at once. And there are some National Geographic videos on YouTube about this, and it's quite a spectacle to see. It's quite amazing. Then they all rotate around the Kaaba to simulate the rotation of the earth and to demonstrate that the Kaaba is the center of Islam, as symbolic of Allah being the center of Islam. when you are inside the Kaaba, you can technically pray in any direction. Any other Muslim throughout the world has to face Mecca. If you are inside the Kaaba, you are at the center and may pray anywhere. I think that's very interesting. And this is required of Muslims once in their lifetime. And it has to be during the month of Hajj. Now, there are other lesser pilgrimages you can take any time of the year. And I believe they technically count. But it's expected that everyone go on Hajj. And there are many symbolic things. There are periods of time in which you gather around these stone pillars and you throw rocks at them to simulate the victory over Satan and the elimination of sin in your life. You're expected to walk very long distances up a mountain, and then there is the actual time in the mosque in Mecca. Only a Muslim can go. You need to be a documented Muslim to be in Mecca, especially during Hajj. And in this National Geographic special, they follow an American Muslim who is going on Hajj. And they talk about all the different hoops she had to jump through to demonstrate she was a real Muslim. So we have Shahada, Salat, Zakat, Saum, and Hajj as the 5 basic pillars of the Islamic faith, 5 basic duties that every Muslim has to do. That in many ways is even though Christianity has analogous actions, we think very differently about this, because in Christianity, in order to be a Christian, we talk more in terms of faith and trust and assent and internal characteristics. Islam talks more about external actions, what you do, not necessarily what you trust. So that even though the 5 basic beliefs and the 5 basic duties of Islam, Christians are somewhat similar. There are points of connection there. There is a fundamental, foundational difference between these two. And I hope this talk has helped you understand who these people are and what they believe and what they do. Thanks.